very warm welcome to a special broadcast, National Education Policy 2020, 2 years on. It's been 2 years since the National Education Policy was announced on 29th July 2020. It is a transformative policy that proposes comprehensive reforms in school and higher education in India and aims to have an education system that is second to none by 2040. It identifies 2030 to 2040 as the decade when the policy will be in operational mode. In the last 2 years, the Government of India has facilitated extensive consultations with key stakeholders on implementation of the policy. Some key steps towards implementation have been completed. For instance, the making of a 3-month school preparation module for grade 1, as free and compulsory education now covers a larger number of years from 3 to 18 years. But a lot more is work in progress, both in school as well as higher education. Today, we will be joined by an eminent panel of experts and regulators of higher education in India to take stock of the progress made so far in implementation of NEP and also lay out the road ahead for the full-fledged implementation of National Education Policy. I'm pleased to introduce an eminent panel of guests. TV Mohandas Pai, eminent educationist and Padma Shri awardee, is joining us. Professor M. Jagdish Kumar, Chairman, University Grants Commission, a statutory body of the Government of India which is entrusted with funding, coordinating, determining and maintaining standards in institutions of higher education. And Professor Anil Sahasrabudhe, Chairman, All India Council for Technical Education, the apex body for technical education in India. Gentlemen, welcome to this special broadcast. Such a pleasure to have the three of you here. Mr. Pai, I want to begin with an independent point of view, so I'm coming to you. Let's revisit 2 years down the line after the announcement of the National Education Policy.
Everybody involved, the universities, schools, colleges, the faculty, parents, etc. There has been exhaustive discussion. It is broad-based, it is principle-based, not rule-based. And I think in the last 2 years, with Prime Minister Modi taking deep interest, everybody taking deep interest, regulators like UGC and AICTE and others taking deep interest, for the first time in 35, 40 years that I have seen, there's a deep, near consensus, 99% consensus, that this is a great policy for India and is the right thing for India at this point of time. To me, that is the biggest achievement that's happened in the policy because it's truly democratic. Second, I think it is reducing the workload on children and making them very creative. And starting from preschool, which is necessary today, and I think this reducing the burden on children and making them think, making them problem solvers, giving them more time to work with community, giving them hands-on projects, I think is fantastic because that is what is required to create a creative society. And there's no need for so much of information to be stuffed into the little children's heads as we do today. The third important thing is total flexibility in the way we can do our college degree. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, choice of subject, choice of credits, getting other institutions is unbelievable. The dream come true. You feel like going back to college. You can do a degree in nuclear science with the music and cricket, and then go on to IT, then go on to logic, go on to ancient philosophy. Look at it. It opens up everybody else. Yes, capacity has to be built up and everything has to be done up. The next issue is about the big challenge of autonomy for institutions. Government has promised that based on rating, they're going to give autonomy. We want to see that. I think Dr. Sahasrabudhe and I'm sure the new head of UGC will give them greater autonomy in the next 2 years because both of them have run educational institutions. They know the pain when somebody sits in Delhi and cracks the whip and controls them because both have built great institutions. Both are wonderful people who have run educational institutions. So autonomy is something that has to come. It's been given. And the last point, which is yet to be activated, and I hope Dr. Jagdish Kumar and Anil Sahasrabudhe will talk to Prime Minister Modi, is the 50,000 crore National Research Fund. We need a National Research Fund because this country requires investment at the top. We want our universities to be hub of research, to great thinking, young, bright minds sitting here and changing the context and thinking of a whole new world. For that, money is required, public money is required. That has to be put into effect and done. These are the top 5 things I think at the macro level, which I think is truly transformative. And I must say, I'm very, very excited about what has happened and the direction that it has taken in the last 2 years.
Professor Kumar, there are so many reforms that have been introduced by way of the National Education Policy, and some salient features are pointed out by Mr. Pai. So we are now looking at education that will be multidisciplinary, an academic bank of credits, multiple entry and exit, National Research Foundation and a fund, to name a few. What is the kind of progress that have been made in the last 2 years towards some of these goals?
You see, Dr. Mohandas Pai represents one section of the stakeholders.
Yes.
People who are heading the higher educational institutions or running them. And I can see the excitement in his voice because of the pace at which the NEP reforms are being implemented. But you see, for these reforms to be implemented, even at this stage, it is important that we consult stakeholders and also experts, which we are doing. And you will see the implementation, the effects of implementation at 2 stages. One, the first stage, of course, is universities themselves implementing new courses and absorbing some of the reforms that the regulators are announcing. And then in the next stage, you will see students undergoing this changing pedagogical environment in the university system. And they will take 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, depending on the degrees that they are taking under these new reforms. And when they pass out, and when you see that their lives are being transformed because of the reforms that are being implemented, then at second stage onwards, you will start seeing the effects of the national educational policy implementation. And to the question that you have mentioned about multidisciplinary and holistic education, you see, this is one of the top priorities of the national education policy. In fact, in the recent conference that we had at Varanasi, which was inaugurated by Prime Minister, Akhil Bharatiya Shiksha Samagamam, in this we focused on key points of the NEP to see how these are being implemented. And the first thing that we discussed was multidisciplinary and holistic education. And the second most important point that we discussed was research, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And the third one was governance and capacity building. Some of the things that Dr. Mohandas Pai has just now mentioned. And we have done considerable amount of progress in these 3 areas. But let me also add very briefly the other areas in which we have reviewed and then looking at how to implement these at a rapid pace.
Right.
For example, the quality accreditation, ranking of our institutions, because quality of education is very, very important in our higher educational institutions. And digital empowerment and online education, equitability and affordability of education,
Yes.
these are also very important aspects, and many reforms are being rolled out to take care of these 3 aspects. And the last 3 that I would like to mention is the emphasis on the Indian knowledge systems.
Yes.
And how to integrate this as part of our higher educational system. And this is something that we are looking at. And skill development and employability of our students who pass out of the HEIs. And lastly, internationalization of our education. So many such reforms are being implemented, and UGC is coming out with many regulations soon. In another couple of months, we will be announcing many more regulations. But to conclude, UGC is not just announcing only some regulations and guidelines. UGC, in fact, frequently meeting the heads of the higher educational institutions,
Absolutely.
hand-holding and discussing with them to understand the challenges that they are also facing in implementing some of these reforms. Because ultimately, all our dream is to see that the reforms are being implemented on the ground,
Right.
and there is a transformation of our higher education.
Absolutely. So extensive consultations are taking place with all stakeholders. After all the stakeholders put together need to implement the national education policy. And you referred to the recent higher education conclave in Varanasi, which focused on implementation of the policy. Mr. Sahasrabudhe, I'll pick up one of the points that Professor Kumar had mentioned. So the question to you is that what's the vision behind the focus that we are seeing in the national education policy on promotion of the mother tongue, regional languages, local languages in school curricula and higher education curricula, and also Indian art and culture? Because references have been made to how various countries have done that, and India hasn't been able to do as much as one would have liked. So what is the vision behind it, and how is the road ahead going to be in terms of its implementation?
See, national education policy is very clear on the policy of languages. It is not only the 3 language formula in the school education, but in fact, teaching learning in the mother tongue is very important, significant at the lowest level. But how we can provide the mother tongue education even in higher education, be it in engineering, be it in medical, be it in law, that is what is stated in the national education policy. And taking the leaf out of that in right earnest, we found out there was no regulation which actually stopped teaching learning in the mother tongue. This is a myth that it can only be taught in English. Whereas prior to independence, it was also taught in Urdu and some other languages. And even today, some polytechnic education is done in Kannada, Tamil, and Telugu as well as Hindi. And therefore, we took it up very seriously and started advocating our institutions to start teaching learning in engineering education in our mother tongue. And we were happy in the very first year, we had 19 colleges who onboarded to teach in 6 different Indian languages from 10 different states. And this year, the number has doubled. There are already 40 institutions and 11 states, and more languages have also come in. I think that is the way forward which has been already happening. But one very important thing which I would like to mention here is, why did it not succeed earlier was because the books were not available in these languages.
Right.
The books are always available in English, and therefore it was a natural corollary that we learn in English. And so we started with, creating books in Indian languages. Today we have a AI-based translation tool which translates English books into 12 Indian languages. Once books are available, which we have already made available for both Polytechnic first year and Engineering first year last year, and now we are in the preparation for doing the same for the second year books. And when the students come to the third year, we will provide in the third year books also. So if we do that, the popularism of doing this will start increasing. And the students, if they have to be innovative, the thinking has to be in the mother tongue, and only then innovation will come. Research will come from out of their minds and brains. And that's why this teaching learning process in mother tongue is going to be very, very valuable in years to come. We have started baby steps. I'm sure 2-3 years down the line, there will be excellent results coming out of this system.
Okay. Mr. Pai, you had outlined the 5 salient features of the national education policy which you think are most significant. But what are the 5 challenges going forward as an educationist that you see in implementation of the policy? And can hand-holding and support which is comprehensive in nature help address those issues?
Well, I think the first challenge that we need is effective communication from the government and regulators to everybody in the system. Please remember, we are undergoing a huge change management where we have 26.5 crore children in school, 4 crore children in colleges. No country has such large numbers in human history. And you are going to change all that in 8-10 years. So there has to be a constant communication, constant pushing, so everybody knows what is happening at every point of time. So I will use your media to urge both these extraordinary people to give us a report on the 2nd anniversary of NEP, what has been achieved so far and what is the agenda for the next 1 year, and release a report every year so that everybody is on the same page. There should be no miscommunication that things are not happening, because we need this positivity to go. To me, that is a big challenge, because we have to change the mindset of people, and that is very, very difficult in any country, in any system. The second big challenge is how to ensure that our educational institutions, especially higher education institutions, learn to enjoy autonomy and exercise autonomy. They have to put in proper governance. They have to be autonomous. They have to have the responsibility to be accountable. They have to be much more honest, especially some of these private sector universities in in the medical field, etc. So how do you create a cultural change in governance? Because we have a large system, more than 1,100 universities. We need 1,100 vice chancellors. Where are they? We need about maybe 11,000, 12,000 board members, right? This is much larger than the corporate sector. So we have to have a governance mechanism. That is a big challenge. Now, the third challenge is how to upgrade innovation and research. Now, research does not come easy. It takes years and years of years. We only spend 5,500 crores a year in our universities on research. While we have good research in a few, how do you make sure the top 200 universities have a research culture? There's a cultural change, a lot of funding is required, a lot of handholding is required, a lot of collaboration is required, and we have to build up this entire huge system. And the fourth big challenge is how do you ensure that we have more PhDs? We only have 130,000 PhDs, but we need PhDs in deep science. Most of the PhDs are coming out 40,000 a year. 135,000 is the admitted one. 35, 40,000 is something called arts. Nobody knows what it means. Only 500 computer science faculty with PhDs. We need PhDs in many areas of science and technology and social sciences who are of high quality. How do you create the top? And lastly, how do we ensure that our children actually become creative? The policy is in place. Implementation is going to be a challenge because one, we have to reduce the curriculum by 30-50% immediately. And two, we have to train 1.6 crore teachers in school. Now remember, many of the states are behind. Many of the states have first-time children. How do we enhance the quality of education in school up to an acceptable minimum level? Because like Dr. Sahasrabudhe said, we have to educate them in the mother tongue. We may have to teach English as a language to them so that they're part of the country. It's a big challenge, and teachers have to be trained. Infrastructure has to be put in. They must actually implement all that because in many of the state schools, they don't know how to implement. They don't have leaders who can implement. Private schools, many of them have it. Maybe the top 20%. Government schools, because the poorest children go to government schools. And they can't afford to pay the fees to go to private school. It's not going to change. 50% of children are in government schools, and of the balance 50%, half of them are in indifferent private schools. So 75% of people require help. I think these are the 5 big challenges we need to do. And I think both these gentlemen are extraordinary people. I think this country depends on both of them in the next 2 years to make the change evident to every citizen of this country.
And I'm sure they are up for it and they agree with the challenges that you have pointed out. It's interesting, Mr. Kumar, that he said that a report card should come out because the policy mentions that there has to be an annual review of the targets that have been achieved. Having said that, on the HECI, a single regulator for higher education, can you explain to us with the help of an example on how the new system under HECI with 4 verticals which would be independent in nature be different from what we have today, which a common man can understand, and why a single regulator was required for higher education?
Right. That's a very important question that you have asked. In the current system, 70% of the students in the higher educational institutions, they are doing BA, BCom, BSc out of 4 crores. And this is handled by UGC. And remaining 30% of the students, they study all professional programs in engineering, pharmacy, medicine, law, agriculture, and so on. And there are multiple regulators for these 30% of the students. And it is important to have a single window regulator so that any program, in whichever program you want to start new courses, you want to start new institutions, they can simply approach the Higher Education Commission of India, avoiding going to multiple regulators, which will create lots of delays. That is point 1. And point 2, some of the reforms that NEP is planning to do, for example, multidisciplinary education, improving the research innovation ecosystem in the university system, all these things can happen only if there is interaction between educational institutions. For example, right now there is hardly any significant interaction between universities of different disciplines. And so what HECI will do is to provide a single window for all the educational institutions, any degree awarding institution in any discipline in our country. HECI is the top body, but under HECI there will be 4 verticals. You have the National Higher Educational Regulatory Council, under which UGC, AICTE, and the National Council for Teacher Education and all the other important regulators will function together under this single regulatory body. And then you have, as I mentioned, quality is very, very important. Governance of the institutions, capacity building is very, very important. And to take care of that, you have the second vertical, which is the National Accreditation Council, which will set the standards for all these activities that take place in the higher educational institutions. But NAC will not be accrediting the institutions. It will approve, for example, the state higher educational accreditation councils or even some private accreditation councils, so that they will accredit the higher educational institutions within the parameters set by the second vertical. And the third one is what Dr. Pai is referring to. We will have a third vertical which will look after all the research funding activities of the universities. And the fourth vertical is the National Education Council for setting standards in curriculum, for example, in teacher training and various other issues related to teaching, learning, and pedagogical issues.
Right.
So as you can see, by having one single umbrella organization such as HECI, and then 4 verticals under 8, we expect that the NEP and the reforms that the NEP envisages can be implemented rapidly.
Right, and education also has to be futuristic, a point that Professor Kumar had made earlier. Professor Sahasrabudhe, on that particular issue, we are aware that the NEP proposes a lot in terms of integrating technology with education, not just online education, but making use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc. Do you think that such a focus and vision will ensure that our education is very much in tune with the times and also ready for the 21st century?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, many of the initiatives which we have already started are in line with use of technology in education, be it in terms of online education, giving full degrees, or in the curriculum, whatever credits are there, of which 40% of the credits being allowed to be taken from the MOOC platform. This itself is enabling taking of the best possible courses from the best faculty in the country by students who are in remote places. Some of the places where there is no good teacher available, they can take courses from the best of the teachers from IITs or some of the best universities of the country. I think, therefore, use of technology has already begun. More importantly, how we can have this multidisciplinary education possible for students of arts taking some courses of engineering, or a student of engineering taking a course of law, can be possible, because in your own institution you may not have that faculty, but you can always take that from some other source. And that is where the technology is going to come in handy. We already have an internship portal where students can join in and can take internship opportunity from the best of the possible locations, be it from the government departments, be it from the large or small scale industry, be it from the startup. So technology is an enabling force for internship, for becoming an entrepreneur, for becoming what we say that learning to learn, and lifelong learning. All of these are possible through the mechanism of the tools that are available. We have a platform called National Educational Alliance for Technologies, where AI-based training of students in different domains of knowledge is possible.
Yes.
So I think already technology is playing a big role, and I hope in the future, whether it is AR, VR, whether it is various types of new tools which are coming in this domain, will also help and aid in learning. Audio, visual, gaming, which is very, very important for school children. While playing games, you learn many scientific concepts. I think all of that is going to happen in the future.
Right. 15 seconds to the three of you on the biggest priority in the next 1 year. Professor Sahasrabudhe.
See, my take is the policy already talks about access, equity, etc. But how do we take care of accessibility for differently abled, for SLDs, for dyslexic children? I think we have already set up committee and we are going to fund 15 odd states in different languages to have full accessible education.
Mr. Pai?
Well, I think we have to look at the low-hanging fruit. For example, cutting the curriculum content in schools and colleges by 25-30%, putting in project work. That can easily be done in the next 1 year, right? Giving autonomy to the top 200 universities and handholding them. That can easily be done. National Research Foundation to kick off. That can easily be done in the next 12 months. So I think if both the gentlemen here who are extraordinary people give a road ahead for the next 1 year, I'm sure they know what to do. They know what to do. They know what. They're brilliant people. They know what to do. If they do that, we'll see the future happen before our own eyes.
Professor Kumar, 10 seconds.
Right. No, our top priorities are going to be providing more flexibility to the students in accessing higher education, providing accountability, what Dr. Pai is referring to, autonomy with accountability, and of course, make our education more accessible to the students using technology.
That's all the time that we have for this discussion. Thank you so much, Professor Kumar, Professor Sahasrabudhe, Mohandas Pai, for having joined us with your views. So while a beginning has been made, the focus will continue to be on prioritization for implementation of the National Education Policy, effective coordination with all stakeholders, building infrastructure, pledging resources and revamping the whole education system over time with focus on research, innovation, employability and developing India's demographic dividend in such a manner that the youth become conscionable citizens and are ready to lead the 21st century world. That's all then in this special broadcast, National Education Policy 2020, 2 years on. Thanks for watching.